I'm Jordan Hatfield, and this is Faster Film Critic. Today on the show, we discuss The Piano Lesson with Kolter and Chase. The Piano Lesson is a 2024 Netflix original about a black family in 1936 Pennsylvania. Fair warning to all my musician friends out there, the film is more about stealing a piano than it is about playing it. It's directed by Malcolm Washington and stars Samuel L. Jackson, John David Washington, and Danielle Deadweiler. Get in! We're going cinephiling. How we doing today?
Good, man.
Doing great.
How are you guys?
Fantastic. But hey, I got a random question. What'd you guys think of The Piano Lesson?
Movies that are adapted from plays are always a little bit different. Overall, I think for this being Malcolm Washington's directorial debut, it was pretty solid.
Have either of you seen any of August Wilson's plays?
I have not.
I have not.
No.
Me neither. What about any movies based on his screenwrites? Piano Lesson is his third play that was adapted to film. The first one was Fences, starring Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah.
Have you seen either of those?
I've seen Fences.
You saw Fences?
Yeah.
Fences.
Yeah.
What'd you think of Fences? Did you like Fences?
I did, man. Yeah. I mean, dude, we talked about this on our last episode for Gladiator 2. Denzel Washington never disappoints, ever. It's a 1950s, basically he was an aspiring ball player who, by the time he was able to kind of do that professionally, it was too late. In other words, they weren't letting African-American athletes be ball players until he was kind of past his prime and he couldn't. And there's this great wedge between him and his son in that movie that I thought was really moving. Great performance by Denzel Washington, of course. And one of the few instances where I think the play adapted to kind of a more cinematic setting that you can't always do with the play. Plays are very confined. You're kind of restricted to what you can do on a stage versus the whole world's open to you when you're shooting a movie. So I loved it.
So how well did you think this movie adapted to the screen compared to Fences?
Fences was great. Less claustrophobic than the other films. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is a little bit more claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Piano Lesson is a little bit more claustrophobic.
Yep.
Like you say, Kolter, just because you're adapting a stage play to the big screen, right? But I did think they do a good job here in kind of opening it up. There's several scenes that take place outside of Bernice's home here.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the play. I thought the film was really good.
Yeah. Yeah, having not seen the play after watching the movie, I feel like I have seen the play, if that makes sense.
If I had the opportunity to see this on Broadway, I would take it. There's a lot to love about this film, Piano Lesson. The piano itself is such a really cool way to tie in the many themes of the movie. I mean, the piano represents a lot of things. It represents family history and suffering, represents exploitation, it represents hope and progress. It represents a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool way to tie that all into this story.
Yeah, I thought so too. It created some really cool dynamics with the family and their thoughts about the piano. I was a little bit worried knowing that this was a Netflix original film.
Yeah.
A lot of the Netflix original films I've seen are just, they feel corporate and soulless and they lack the spark that I look for. But really right off the bat with this film, with them stealing the piano, that scene I thought was so good. Even though I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about the film, I felt that I was in good hands.
Yeah. Corporate and soulless is a great way to put that.
I have such a hatred for those movies. I think Netflix only makes them to fill up that homepage so it doesn't look so empty.
Yeah, probably. Well, I know the producers and Malcolm Washington who directed this. Malcolm Washington had stated that one of the reasons why he wanted this to go on Netflix was accessibility. He wanted, people who were in close proximity to theaters or maybe couldn't afford the ticket price to be able to kind of share in this experience. So,
I'm going to push back on you guys a little bit here. Okay. Netflix has a ton of original films that are junk.
Okay, they have some that are great.
Yeah. But they have got some that are absolutely fantastic. I mean, the first one that comes to my mind is All Quiet on the Western Front.
Okay, fair.
That's a Netflix original.
I didn't know that.
That film is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs by Coen Brothers.
True,
love that film. Don't love every short, but love the film. David Fincher's put out some great stuff on Netflix.
Yeah, that's true.
But you're right in the fact that the vast majority of them are soulless. And, Chase, I'm going to agree with you. Whenever a film goes straight to Netflix, my expectations are always lowered.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. It's a little disappointing.
Yeah. Straight to streaming is the new straight to home video.
It feels the same. However, straight to streaming is trying to be bigger.
It is.
Than straight to VHS.
Yeah.
It's trying.
Yeah.
Like straight to VHS never really tried. It was just kind of like,
yeah.
Take it for what
it
it is.
or leave
Where
it.
streaming wants to be.
I mean, Fincher's last film was straight to Netflix. That was a Netflix original.
And I believe his next film is going straight to Netflix. They're making a push for it. I thought The Piano Lesson was better than your typical straight to Netflix film, though. And by the way, I believe this did have a short, limited theatrical run somewhere.
Yeah.
Didn't come
Okay.
here, unfortunately. So one may argue it wasn't straight to Netflix, but it definitely wasn't a broad release. Most people are only going to be able to see this on Netflix.
I think has a lot to do with Oscar consideration. Like they can say it had a theatrical run, which in this case, I would say, especially in Danielle Deadweiler's case, who played Bernice in this movie, probably gives an Oscar-worthy performance.
Danielle Deadweiler is incredible. Have you guys seen Till?
No.
I have not.
No.
Put that one on your lists. Okay. That one's great. She is absolutely incredible. It's heavy. It's really heavy, but it's in a fantastic film. A fantastic film that I think everyone should see. And she's great in this too.
She is.
Yeah, she gives a great performance.
The entire cast in this is magnificent. Love Samuel L. Jackson. He's another Denzel Washington, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Everything the guy does, I like.
Except for
I actually had
Snakes on a Plane.
Oh, come on, dude. That show's great. Okay. Yeah, you're right. He does take some garbage roles. But when he's in a good role, he's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can agree with you on Sam Jackson. But there were some characters I had some problems with.
Who didn't you like?
The two characters, Lyman and Avery. Lyman was the friend who bought the suit.
Yeah.
Avery was the pastor.
Yeah.
I just couldn't figure them out the whole movie. Every time they were on screen, I was a little uncomfortable. I don't know if they were overly complex or poorly written, because I just could not figure them out.
I loved Lyman's character.
Maybe it was in the performance. I don't know. It just did not work for me. In the scene with him and Bernice, I did not know how to feel. I felt uncomfortable.
Oh,
I didn't
yeah.
know if the movie wanted me to like this scene.
Yeah.
That's
a good way to put it.
It
Really
didn't
good way
work
to put
for
it.
me the way I wish it did.
Yeah.
I think that scene was meant to make you feel uncomfortable. I think it was an uncomfortable scene intentionally. I thought Ray Fisher did an incredible job as Lyman. In fact, he was one of my favorite characters in the story.
Yeah.
I loved him.
Yeah, he was. It's so funny that you mentioned those two characters, Chase, because Avery I felt was either underdeveloped or underused. You didn't really get a chance to know him, not much, and then when he kind of comes in at the end to do his whole kind of bless the house thing was a little odd.
I will agree, Chase, that Avery was a little bit weak. However, I wouldn't want another 15 minutes in this story to develop his character more.
Yeah.
Ray Fisher playing Lyman in this was a bit of a surprise. I'd only ever seen him as Cyborg in the Justice League before this, and that was like, it took me a while to figure out, like, where do I know this guy from? And let's be honest, his performance as Cyborg in Justice League was nothing special. But here he's kind of coy and charming in a way that I didn't really expect. So I kind of enjoyed his subdued, laid back. He was definitely the opposite to kind of Boy Willie's character in this.
This movie's really dialogue driven.
Yeah.
Slow burn up till the end.
Yeah, for sure.
And he talks so slow and so stuttery.
I loved it.
Maybe the problem is in the dialogue. A lot of the dialogue wasn't working for me. I can see people loving this relaxed feel of this film, but it just didn't work for me. I wish it did, but
I think The Piano Lesson is trying to give us just a glimpse into the experience of a black family during this period of time without all the heaviness of, say, Till or 12 Years a Slave, which are both incredible films. Films I prefer, largely because of their heaviness and their realism. But this is far more accessible.
Yeah, okay.
The Piano Lesson does touch on themes of slavery and racism and social injustice and suffering, but it's not as heavy as those other films.
Yeah.
It approaches these subjects and its story from a much lighter perspective.
I think it was approached to be broadly appealing, too. It's a story about reclamation on top of the other themes that you just mentioned and kind of confronting the ghost of the past. And almost every character in this ensemble, they're all kind of spilling over in some way with this like unprocessed grief. In particular with Bernice, I think, she's stubborn. She's not wanting to kind of talk about things. She loves her brother and her brother loves her, but there's a distance between the two of them. As there is with all these characters. They're all connected in a familiar way with each other, but yeah, it's tough. When you talk about a cultural experience and trying to make it relate to everybody, it's tough. And I don't know if you guys watched, there is a supplemental piece to The Piano Lesson on Netflix as well, in which some of the cast and producers are talking about it. And at one of these kind of Q&As, the producer talks about a question being directed to Denzel Washington. And the question came from this super white Irish dude who kind of stood up and in a very thick Irish accent says, "Thanks for telling a story about my dad." Because at the end of the day, like, yes, the slavery exists in many cultures and many countries across the world. Doesn't mean that all those experiences are going to be similar, but there's a through line still. And for them to kind of want to make the message in this movie broadly appealing is both admirable and extremely difficult to balance effectively, I would think.
The way they did it was really good.
Yeah.
I missed those supplemental interviews, Kolter. I'm going to have to go back and check those out. But shifting gears, what'd you guys think of the music in The Piano Lesson?
The music was great.
Yeah, it was. You can look at it two ways. The score of the film, which is at times is kind of haunting. Haunting is a theme in this movie that's sort of metaphorical. And then there's that scene, my favorite scene in the movie, where you've got kind of all the guys, all the male characters, they're sitting around this table, they're drinking whiskey, and they kind of break out into this song that they all know.
That's my favorite scene, too.
Yeah, man, I thought that was so cool, so moving. And again, talking about that grief, where you kind of see that expressed in kind of this communal way. Very cool.
There's something about early to mid 1900s soul music from that period of time that is so powerful. I just love it.
Yeah.
And you're right, that scene where they're gathered around the table and they kind of start to sing. My favorite scene of the whole movie as well, Kolter. Thought it was super powerful, super well done, captivating, transcending. Yeah. Absolutely loved that song and that scene.
Yeah, transcending is a good word to pick for that.
But there's some other scenes in the film that depict music, particularly more jazz music, that I thought was also just wonderful. Loved it.
Yeah, honestly, that's always been kind of my favorite era of music, is that kind of 30s to 60s. I love all of it. Blues, swing, blues in particular, man. I think that just kind of, I don't know why.
So good.
Yeah, I don't know why I've always loved that sound. It's like this mix of catchy grooves and pain, but there's this weird sense of belonging to it as well. I mean, man, I don't know. To this day, it's like my go-to stuff to listen to.
Which made it so good for the piano to be the symbol.
Yeah.
The centerpiece of the theme of this film.
Yeah.
Speaking of the piano, I've got a piano story for you guys.
Oh, yeah?
If you want to hear it.
Okay.
So my sister used to live close to us.
Okay.
And her next door neighbor mentioned somehow, somewhere, that she had a piano that she was getting rid of. And my sister said, "I don't have a piano. I would like one. How much will you sell it for?" And the neighbor said, "I'll make you a deal. You can have my piano if you will drive to my relative's house and pick up a family heirloom piano and bring it back to me." She was an older lady.
Okay.
She says, "I don't have a truck and I don't have the ability to get it here, but this piano has been passed through generations. It's extremely important to my family and to me, and I would like it." My sister says, "Absolutely." So she calls me up. We move the old piano from the neighbor's house into my sister's house. Then I call up my cousin, and we grab a truck, and we head down to this relative's house to pick up this old family heirloom. And there's supposed to be some people there to meet us and to help us load up this piano. So we take 2 different cars. He's in the truck, I'm in my car. We go down there, and we load up the piano, and I turn to the family there, and I ask if they have any straps. And everyone's like, "No, we don't have straps. We don't." And I said, "Do you have rope?" And they're like, "No, we don't have rope. No way to tie this piano into the back of the truck." And I'm like, "Guys, it's like 30 miles back to my sister's house. Like, I'm a little nervous about driving this thing without tying it in." And they're like, "Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be totally fine. It's super heavy. It'll be fine." And I'm like, okay. Like, we'll drive slow. So my cousin's driving the truck, and I'm driving in the car behind him. And we start headed back to deliver this ancient heirloom piano to this sweet old lady. And it's like the third turn we take. That piano rolls right out of the back of the truck, hits the ground, and I'm telling you, it shatters into a million pieces. Oh my goodness. I felt so bad. But on one hand,
told you.
I knew we should have tied it in. Like I told you guys we should have tied it in.
Oh, no.
Dude, destroyed. So we go back to this old lady, and she's heartbroken.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And we're like, what do you say? Do you want your old piano back? And she's like, no, I don't.
Here it is in 5 garbage bags.
Brutal. No, it was like 12 Dude, this thing exploded.
Yeah. Well,
I couldn't believe it.
Oh, yeah.
Just all over this intersection. Brutal.
Oh, that would be devastating.
How do you guys feel about John David Washington's portrayal as Boy Willie? I've heard some things. I've heard some feedback from a lot of folks who actually really liked the play that thought he was a little over the top in this.
I could understand that perspective, but I did love his performance. I thought it was great.
For sure.
Yeah, I didn't get that feeling. I felt like, as Chase mentioned earlier, the film is a little bit claustrophobic. It's a little bit slower paced. And I felt like he brought some energy that I appreciated. Is he dramatic? Yeah, but I didn't think about it until you just said it. I will say it's the first time that I've seen Denzel Washington in John David Washington.
Oh,
like,
same.
I've seen films of him, and it's like, I can tell that's his son. But in this film, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I can see Denzel Washington here.
You know, it's funny.
In a big way.
I can't see it as much as I hear it. Like, I look at his face, and I wouldn't think that that's Denzel Washington's son. But when he speaks, man, there's like these little tells. And I'm like, oh, my God, he sounds just like his dad. It's so cool.
And sometimes the way he speaks, it's in his mouth, I think, that I see Denzel.
Sure.
But that caught me off guard because I've seen several movies with John David Washington and never noticed it. And this was the first time, and it kept taking me out of the movie. I kept thinking, oh my gosh, it's Denzel here I'm watching.
That's funny.
I liked his character, though. I liked the way he interpreted and portrayed him.
I think the story needed that kind of energy.
I was just going to say the same thing. If he didn't have that, I think this would have been a little bit too understimulating. But between Boy Willie's, or John David Washington's depiction of Boy Willie, as well as the cinematography, man, the camera guy is working hard in this.
Yeah.
There's some really pretty and seamless, like the camera just flows around this space that's, it's got to be a tight space, or it's a very well-built set. But they must have had to work with a masterful DP to kind of figure out how to shoot some of these things, to give it that energy, because without that, then really what you've got is just a fixed perspective on a stage and you're watching a play. And that's a tough thing to give life to. We talked about this before. Some of the shots, the dance hall, the shots of them driving, the ending of the movie kind of opens it up kind of metaphysically and visually to a bigger, more open, promising, and hopeful future.
One scene that really stuck out to me that I thought was beautiful is when the pastor's first introduced, and it's got that soulful kind of slow music in the background. It's outside, and he's just walking over towards the house. I mean, there's not much going on, but it's so cool. And the way the light hits the camera in so many scenes, a little bit of a glare.
Speaking of a glare, the exorcism in this film.
The old Sutter.
What do you think of that aspect of the story?
The supernatural aspects of the story, I was surprised. I didn't know that was the kind of movie we were going into when she flicks on and off the light.
Right.
I didn't know how to feel about it. I still don't really know how to feel about it.
Yeah.
It clashes with the way that the movie approaches storytelling, with the relaxed, realistic feel.
Well put.
And then when you throw in these supernatural elements, it clashes really, really bad.
When the movie ended, I was like, I don't know that worked for me. As I thought about it, I do really like the idea. I like that clash that you're talking about. I like how it disrupts the other conversations that are going on in the room. I love the subtlety. The scene where she turns off the lights and he's there. She turns them on and he's gone. She turns them off and he's there again. That subtlety I really liked. But towards the end, when he's throwing people around and the lights are flickering, it got a little too much. I wish they would have dialed that back. This is not a horror film. Here we are talking about ghosts and exorcisms. This is not a horror film. Right. I mean, there may be a couple parts that would scare small children, but I wouldn't say that this is a horror film at all. I just felt like they leaned into it a little heavy.
Yeah.
It made it feel so it wasn't grounded in reality, which made the impact of the climax and message, it didn't work as strong as I'd hoped.
Yeah. It drifts kind of inexplicably from being metaphorical, takes a sharp turn into the physical realm, which you could argue it gives every character that's going through that experience a focal point in order to kind of confront and deal with their grief. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, how was this portrayed on a stage? Did we have what was going on in the living room, this blessing, and then in the background, we had Boy Willie having this kind of weird physical confrontation with the specter of Sutter. Yeah, Chase, to your point, I think it works from a metaphorical or psychological standpoint early in the film, and then it takes that weird turn towards the end that I don't know what they were trying to go for there with that.
I love the metaphorical haunting, but when it becomes more of a literal haunting, it weakened the movie. 1 to 5, let's rate it.
A lot of mixed feelings about this film. Usually I love this kind of relaxed storytelling. It just didn't work for me the way I wish it would have.
Okay.
I'm going to land it 2.5 stars.
Yeah, I'm going to come in at a 3.5. I think for this being Malcolm Washington's first experience directing a movie and adapting a play, I think he tackled the themes fairly well. I think he worked with a pretty accomplished and experienced crew of producers and director of photography and cast to kind of, so maybe I'm looking at this from don't get me wrong, not that good of a filmmaker's perspective, but a filmmaker's perspective when I realize how difficult it is to get all these themes put into place in a cohesive story that's not just intended for one singular audience. So I appreciate both the effort, the thoughtfulness and consideration, and the execution. So 3.5 for me.
I liked this film better the second day than I did immediately after it ended.
Okay.
I do think there's a lot of really cool aspects of this film. Emotionally, it wasn't as strong as I hoped it would be. I was expecting something a little heavier.
Yeah.
The film is a little bit lighter, and like you said earlier, Kolter, that has a wide appeal. I think a lot of people will really like this film. I'm going to rate this movie a 3. I think it's worth checking out, especially at home. Not going to cost you much to watch it. Check it out if you have a chance. I think you'll enjoy it.
All right, everybody. For this week's recommendation, we're keeping it in both realms of the Washington family and play adaptations. Set in 1950s Pittsburgh, 2016's Fences, directed by Denzel Washington, tells the story of generational trauma and the ever-growing wedge between a father and his son. This was also an August Wilson play, so if you enjoyed the themes of The Piano Lesson, check this one out too.
Thank you for listening to Faster Film Critic, and please join us next week when we discuss Wicked, directed by John M. Chu. It is the 2024 Musical of the Year. You can also follow us on Letterboxd, Cinetrack, and Instagram. Email us at fasterfilmcritic@gmail.com. Hit us up if you have any questions, comments, feedback, or review requests, and don't forget to share this episode with your movie-loving friends.